Good evening, everyone. So today we'll be having a webinar on post-COVID pulmonary rehab. So let me introduce to you a speaker before we start. So we have today Dr. Arpita Mishra. Mishra over here. So she was my batchmate, a good friend. Okay, so I requested her to take a lecture on pulmonary rehab as she had her MPT in cardiopulmonary. Okay, I don't. I think some of my students would know this. I was talking. I used to talk about no one of my batchmate who told me in neurosurgery ICU that there was a patient, head injury patient, who was having fasciculations, and she just saw that thing and uh, told us. So she was the person. Okay, so she's very good in cardio. Okay, so now I will hand over the thing to Arpita. So Arpita, you can start now.
Thank you, Sunil. Sunil has spoken too highly about me. Lekin, thank you for giving this opportunity to share whatever limited knowledge I have with you people. And I hope this will be of benefit. So without delaying much, should we start,
Yeah, yeah.
Sunil?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. So let's start. Okay. So before we talk about pulmonary rehabilitation in any situation, be it COVID or anything else, here we are talking about COVID. Let us first see what COVID is all about. What exactly is this coronavirus or the pandemic that we are facing right now? Is it new to us or was it known in the past also? So researchers have found that this coronavirus infection has existed for a long time. It has infected the humankind from as long as we know in from 1960s. Before that, in 1950s, it was known to infect animals also. Like in human beings, the first infection was noted somewhere in 1960s. After which there has been a series of other coronaviruses which have infected the human beings. The last few important infections which were there were the SARS-CoV and the MERS-CoV, which occurred in 2003 and 2012. SARS-CoV is the severe acute respiratory syndrome and the MERS-CoV is the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. ये दोनों जो कोरोना वायरस हैं, these two are the ones which are the most identical with the present pandemic, the SARS-CoV-2. If we say the SARS-CoV के साथ, the manifestation of SARS-CoV-2 is somewhere around it's 79% similar to how SARS-CoV manifests. So the present pandemic, they've been given many names to it. We can call it SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, or the novel coronavirus. Why novel coronavirus? Because the strain or the sequencing of the RNA which is found in this coronavirus is pretty new. It is very novel, not seen before, hence the name novel coronavirus. And as I said before also, it closely resembles, closely resembles the SARS-CoVs in terms of manifestation as compared to any other coronavirus viruses of the family. So coming to the timeline a little bit about how this virus is infected and how it has caused a ruckus and how it is spread all over the world. The first identified infection was somewhere in December. What we saw, firstly, it was somewhere in Wuhan in China in a seafood market. So eventually the market was shut down and WHO slowly found out that it is spreading very fast. So within a month's time, within a 1.5 months time, by mid-January, it was reported that this virus has traveled from China to the other countries. So the first infection that was noted, it was in Thailand somewhere in mid-Jan. And by end of Jan, there were already many deaths. The death toll had already climbed to somewhere around 132 with around 6,000 new cases which were coming in. This was somewhere the statistics somewhere in January. So if we see its impact, we will see that by when it started in Jan, there were only 4 territories around the southeastern, around the eastern part, around China, which were affected. And by March, there were around 165 territories which were affected. And I just saw the data somewhere around July 1st, there were around more than 200 countries and territories which were affected by this virus. So it is a very fast spreading virus. And just before starting this lecture, I just went through the data, the latest data available, and I found out there are around 20 million cases affected worldwide right now, and 25 lakh cases are there in India presently. So this is a very fast spreading virus. It spreads, the rate of infection that we call it, its rate of infection is around 2 to 2.5. That means if I get infected, I have the capacity of infecting 2 to 2.5 new people. And then they again, one individual again infects 2 to 2.5 people. So the infectivity was not so high with any of the other coronaviruses as it is with COVID-19. So how does it exactly spread? I'm sure by now all of us have a fair idea about how it spreads. Whether it is an airborne virus or not is still a matter of debate. People are still contemplating it, but it spreads through droplets. So when a person sneezes or a person coughs, or even while talking, the droplets which are generated, they have the capacity of infecting another person. If those droplets go and land on any surface, then if a person touches that, and after touching that surface you touch your mouth, nose, or eyes, then you get infected with the virus. What is the exact pathophysiology of this virus? This is very similar to ARDS or SARS, the severe acute respiratory syndrome, and it causes hyperinflammatory response in the body. It affects the lungs. Slowly, there is hypoxia that leads to heart failure, renal failure, liver failure. The patient enters a state of sepsis, shock, which again leads to multi-organ failure and eventually leads to death. Now, not all the cases progress in the same way. There are mild patients who have mild symptoms, and then if the case is severe, if the infection is severe, this is the pathophysiology. This is the process in which we see the viruses infecting or affecting people. Why exactly does it affect, or there is so much of a multi-organ response, is because of the enzyme or the receptor through which this virus infects our body, through which it enters our system. It is the ACE2 receptor through which it attaches and it enters the system. So this ACE receptor is present on almost all the vital organs, including the brain as well. Your lungs, your arteries, your heart, your kidneys, your intestines, everywhere these receptors, other receptors which are present. And this virus hooks to the ACE2 receptors through which it attacks the lungs, the arteries, the heart, the kidneys, and intestine. That is why it has such a widespread multi-organ manifestation and representation. So, having said that, how can we protect ourselves from this virus? There are only 2 or 3 established ways through which, as of now, we know that we can protect ourselves. Washing of hands as frequently as possible, not touching your nose, mouth, and eyes, and using sanitizers which are at least 70% alcohol base, coughing in your elbow or shoulder and covering your nose and mouth, and social distancing, not gathering in places where there's a lot of crowd, and throwing away the used tissue and stuff into the bins after use. So this is something which is now widely propagated, and everybody, almost all of us know it, but it is very important to religiously follow it. Right now, there is no cure for this disease, so prevention is the best cure. You have to prevent, you have to be cautious so that this virus does not affect us. Now, having talked a little about the virus itself, coming to today's topic, that is pulmonary rehabilitation. This is a definition of pulmonary rehab, which I'm sure all of us are very well aware of. Pulmonary rehabilitation is an evidence-based, multidisciplinary, and comprehensive intervention, okay, with patients with any chronic respiratory disease. Most of the research or the studies which have been done in case of pulmonary rehabilitation is in the field of COPD, but there are studies which have been done in cases of interstitial lung disease and other lung conditions also. So any chronic respiratory disease can be rehabilitated with the principles of using the principles of pulmonary rehabilitation. Now it has to be integrated into the individualized treatment of the patient. And it is designed, the main purpose of designing a pulmonary rehabilitation program is to optimize the functional status of the patient, increase the patient's participation, reduce the healthcare costs through stabilizing or reversing systemic manifestations of whatever disease the patient is suffering from. So the basic goals of pulmonary rehab remain the same, whatever the disease be it COVID-19 or any other disease. The first symptom is to first goal is to, alleviate the symptoms. Whatever symptoms the patient is feeling, whatever the symptoms the patient is having, we have to take care and alleviate the symptoms. Rather than going for, say, exercise training or training of the inspiratory muscles or anything else, first you have to find out what the symptoms are that the patient is facing. And you have to take care of those symptoms first. We have to restore the functional capabilities as much as possible. For knowing that, we should know what was the functional capability, what was the requirement of the patient prior to the disease. Reduce the handicap, thus enhancing overall quality of the life of the patient. Quality of life is the key here. Whenever you are rehabilitating a patient, the patient's quality of life should improve. Now, coming to the present pandemic, there have been few reports and few cases where we have seen that there is persistence of SARS-CoV-2. When do you say the patient is non-infectious or the patient is cured of SARS-CoV-2? When 2 consecutive tests turn out negative. That is the time when we say that the patient is non-infectious or the patient is cured. But what the researchers have found out, or what the studies have published lately, is that sometimes when you use another kit say you are using one kit to test the patient for SARS-CoV-2, you use another kit, the patient has again turned positive between a period of 5 to 13 days. So you have to be careful. So however, the virus may also persist in patients' oropharyngeal cavity for up to 15 days. After they have been declared cured. Because of this, because of the persistence of the virus in the oropharynx, the additional 14 days of quarantine the patient is asked to follow after the patient is discharged from the hospital, that is important. So now if you have to rehabilitate a patient, if the patient has come back and the patient has been discharged and we've been called for the respiratory or pulmonary rehabilitation of a patient, you should know how to don and doff the personal protection equipment before you start treating the patient, because your safety is of utmost importance here. This is a very unique situation. You need to be careful of your own safety, because if you get infected, then you might become a carrier and you might transmit the disease. As we know, the incubation period for the disease is very long. It is somewhere between 1 day to 14 days, 1 to 14 days. And I might not know if I'm getting infected today. For the next 10 days or 14 days, I might not know that I'm carrying the infection. So I have to be careful of this protection equipment so that I don't reinfect the patient and I take care of myself also. So when you don the equipment, first clean your hands, first comes the gown, then the mask, then the eye gear and the gloves. This is the sequence in which you have to don the protective equipment. And when doffing it or when removing it, first the gloves have to go out, then the gown, then the eye gear, then the mask. And after removing the mask, you again wash your hands and sanitize your hands. Now the basic assessment, the basic principles of pulmonary rehabilitation, they remain the same, whether it is a COVID patient or not. These 4 things are the ones which you need to assess, which you need to go through in a patient when you're planning a rehabilitation program for the patient. First comes the patient assessment. Now, when you assess the patient here, the history of the patient is very important, as in any other case. The comorbid conditions, as we just discussed, that COVID affects and infects many of the organs. It is a multi-organ disease. It infects many of the organs that are vital. So the comorbidities, has COVID affected any of the other organs? Is the heart involved? Are the kidneys involved? Is the liver involved? You need to find out about the other organs before you proceed with any of the assessment or planning of the pulmonary rehabilitation of the patient. What was the patient's previous lung condition? Whether the patient was able to perform certain activities, what was his activity level before getting infected? Because you might not know when you're seeing the patient for the first time, you might not know what was the previous lung condition. Ask the patient, were you able to climb this many stairs? What was your condition? Because we need to know whether the patient is only affected by COVID, or was there any other previous lung condition, underlying lung condition, which was there, which was already limiting the patient's function. The vitals of the patients are very important. It has been noted and it has been noticed that even after discharge and even after going home, there is some amount of shortness of breath that the COVID patients encounter, and the COVID patients need some amount of supplemental oxygen even after going home, after getting discharged. So you need to monitor the vitals. You need to record the vitals of the patient before going, so that you have a baseline. You know from where you had started and how much the patient has. The vitals are changing when you're giving any exercise plan. Now, the Borg scale of dyspnea. You can use the original or the modified Borg scale. Anything is fine, but this is very, very important because the patient might have limitations in assessment, in exercise assessment, in training assessment. You do not have the standard spirometer and stuff there. So Borg scale, perceived exertion, what is the dyspnea, what is the level of exertion that the patient is perceiving, will be your objective outcome measure in assessing the patient's progress in the rehabilitation program. After the patient assessment comes the exercise training or the exercise assessment. Now, when you see a COVID patient, the patient's exercise assessment, the amount the patient can train is already compromised. The patient's lungs are compromised. Now, we do not know, since the disease is very new, the virus is very new, we do not know for how long does the virus still affect the lungs of the patient, whether the infection or the CT and the X-ray changes that are noted in the COVID patients last for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or even longer time. We need more time to find that out. So this is something which is subjective. You have to ask the patient, what was the patient's activity level? Because whatever you assess right now, that might not be might not give you the exact picture of the patient's activity level that was there prior to the infection. So this is a subjective assessment that you will need to ask the patient. What was your activity level before the infection? Were you performing any exercises? Were you going to the gym? Were you going for walks? Or what was your activity level? A baseline 6-minute walk test, if it is possible. So there are patients who have comorbidities. There might be patients with osteoarthritis, or there might be patients with rheumatoid arthritis who might not be able to perform your baseline 6-minute walk test. They might not be able to perform this test. So in this case, again, the Borg scale, the dyspnea scale comes into play, and it becomes a very important objective outcome measure. If you can take a 6-minute walk test, baseline test, it is a very good tool for you to really see whether the patient, how much has the patient really improved. And last but not the least, a quality of life questionnaire. You can use an SF36 or SF12, or there are respiratory specific questionnaires which you can use. At the end of any rehabilitation program, as I stated before also, the patient's quality of life is the most important outcome. The patient should feel a difference. The patient should feel कि हाँ मैंने ये exercise program किया, I was a part of this. तो जो मैं पहले नहीं कर पा रहा था या कर पा रही थी, that I am able to do. My quality of life has improved following this rehabilitation program. Patient education. It is one of the most important areas, but most ignored areas. We concentrate more on assessing the patient, assessing the outcome measures, and maybe training the patient, what exercises we have to give, whether we have to give the upper limb, upper extremity training or the lower extremity training or inspiratory muscle training. And we most commonly ignore the education part, but this is the part which will really help when you talk to the patient. Why does the patient need to do the exercise program? Why is rehabilitation important to the patient. So you have to explain the course of the disease to the patient कि आपकी बीमारी exactly क्या है, और rehabilitation जो है वो आपकी बीमारी में आपको किस तरीके से help करेगा. This information has to be transferred, communicated to the patient, so that there is more of adherence of the from the patient's side for the program. And you should explain the benefits of the program to the patient. You have to explain lifestyle modification. If the patient is a smoker, you have to explain the importance of quitting smoking. If the patient has had a sedentary life in the past, you have to explain to the patient the importance of an active lifestyle in the disease and how it will help and how it will improve the patient's quality of life in the long run. So education and talking to the patient is very, very important here. And that has to be an important integrated part of our rehabilitation program. Not last but not the least, psychosocial support. So now this is a very unique situation. Usually in this, we go in for group therapies, we go for group sessions for the caregiver, for the patient, the problems that they are facing. If you discuss, if you talk, you tend to know that I'm not the only one who's suffering from this. There are other people. But in this case, has to be a more of one-on-one treatment because of the fear of infection. But at the same time, we can be creative. We can find out new ways to rope in patients and increase their adherence to the program. So we can form online support groups with the patients, not one patient, but maybe more number of patients. We can form online support groups in which there are more COVID patients who have recovered, who have improved, who have been doing the exercise program with us for some time. We can maybe call them and we can ask them to, give their inputs and tell the patient about how the program has benefited them and how the counseling has benefited them. We can maybe rope in a psychologist or a dietitian for a nutritional counseling, because nutrition is again very important. We need to boost up the immunity of the patient. Exercise definitely helps up in boosting immunity, but at the same time, nutritional support is also very important. So we have to be creative. This is a situation which has not been encountered before. And this is a situation which does not have much of evidence right now. हमें नहीं पता है कि COVID-19 long term में, long run में कैसे, how will it change? How will the patient's lungs change? How will the effect it has had on the other vital organs change, whether it will stay or whether the patient will recover, like in other viral infections. So we have to be creative. We have to find out new ways to rope in patients and to see that they adhere to this exercise program. So these were the rehabilitation guidelines which I found out in some of the studies that I went through. But the general rehabilitation guidelines, the general guidelines for pulmonary rehabilitation, wherein we take care of three things. That is the intensity of the exercise that you're giving to the patient, the frequency of the exercise that is being administered, and the duration of the exercise. These three principles remain the same, whether you're doing it for COVID patients or any other patient. Sorry. So these three principles remain the same. They do not change whether the pulmonary rehabilitation program is being done for the COVID recovered patients. So when we talk about the intensity of exercise that is being given to patients in pulmonary rehabilitation, there have been studies with conflicting results. The results show that most of the time, if not always, high intensity exercise have always benefited patients better than low intensity exercise. And with this, exercises that include the ambulatory muscles, that is the lower extremity muscles, that has really found out to improve the quality of life of the patient. You go in for your quadriceps, your calf muscles, gastrosoleus. The training of these muscles has been found to be really beneficial in patients. So high intensity exercises are better than low intensity exercises is what is being advocated in pulmonary rehabilitation. the frequency most commonly being 2 to 3 times a week, and the duration, long duration, say around 12 weeks, 3 months of pulmonary rehabilitation has found to be more beneficial than say 6 weeks or 4 weeks of rehab program. Now, these were the basic guidelines for patients with COPD or other pulmonary diseases, not for COVID patients. When we talk about COVID patients, there is a multi-organ involvement most of the times, if not always. So the patient might not be able to take high intensity exercise. You need to be careful. You need to monitor the patient. You can always carry a portable pulse oximeter with you, and you can always keep monitoring the patient's pulse rate and the saturation when you're giving the exercise program. That will always give you an idea about how the patient is tolerating the exercise program. Now, these were some of the rehabilitation guidelines pertaining strictly to the COVID-19 situation, the patients with corona. So in this, it was said that in the acute phase, when the patient is, say, in the ICU, or the patient is on oxygen support, or what we call inpatient rehab program is the acute phase, or the first phase of the rehab program. In these, all these exercises are not recommended. And to be very practical, most of the times right now, because of the fear of spreading the infection, there will be least number of healthcare providers which will be involved in the acute phase care phase of the patient. So all these exercises are not very much recommended, for the reason to avoid unnecessary overload on the respiratory muscles firstly, and to avoid any further spread of the virus. But if it is required, if you feel that this is required, then you may go in for any of these techniques. Again, taking care of all the universal precautions, taking care of the personal protection equipment, wearing them well, and taking care of your own safety. Now, secretions are not usually a very common problem in COVID-19 patients. The symptoms, as I said, are similar to SARS-CoV. The symptoms being dry cough, fever, body ache, malaise. And the patients do not usually have secretions as their primary symptom. But comorbid conditions such as bronchiectasis or secondary pneumonia, aspiration, these might increase the secretions. In these situations, postural drainage or can be suggested, or standing or mobilization wherever it is safe for the patient. They are suggested for secretion management. In post-acute phase of the patients, IMT should be included if there is respiratory muscle weakness, which is most likely to be found, because if the patient is on a ventilator or ventilatory support or whatever, there won't be much of deep breathing. So there won't be recruitment of the inspiratory muscles, which leads to their weakening. And deep, slow breathing exercises, thoracic expansion exercises with the help of upper extremity expansion of the rib cage, and airway clearance techniques as in autogenic drainage, huffing and coughing. They can be used in patients wherever they are warranted, wherever you see there is a need of these things. And PEP devices, a cappella, wherever you can use them individually for that patient. You cannot use and interchange the devices without autoclaving them or cleaning them thoroughly, sanitizing them. So whenever you have to use these techniques, you have to be very careful. Utter care has to be taken. And most importantly, care must be taken to avoid overloading of the respiratory system so that there is no distress caused. Now, there were a few recommendations for the COVID condition by the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence in UK. And the recommendations were like that the progressive rehabilitation program are best initiated within the first 30 days, that is the post-acute phase, to have greatest impact on the recovery. So within the first 30 days after the patient has come out of the hospital, tested negative, has stabilized in all the other vital parameters, you can start this. But at the same time, Again, as I have always re-emphasized on this, that clinicians should follow preventive measures where appropriate, personal protective equipment, which is very important. And the rehabilitation programs that have to be individualized according to the patient's need, taking into consideration the comorbidities that the patient might be having. What are the comorbidities? What are the other diseases the patient is infected with or affected with? Whether the heart was infected, whether the patient had a viral cardiac infection, or the renal, or the any other body system vital organ is infected or affected or not, that has to be taken care of. So what should we aim the rehabilitation at? The rehabilitation should be aimed at relieving the symptoms of dyspnea, psychological distress. Psychological distress is seen to be a major, what do you say, factor, or it is a major thing which is noted in COVID patients. एक patient एक room में बंद है बहुत दिनों के लिए. For a long time, the patient is, in a single room. The patient is there in that single room. So there is some kind of psychological effect on that patient. So the psychological distress is bound to happen. So relieving the symptoms of dyspnea, psychological distress, improving the participation of the patient for rehabilitation, quality of life, and the physical function. These are the things which have to be aimed at. And patient should be reviewed through the rehabilitation process. As I said, we can carry a pulse oximeter, portable pulse oximeter with us, and we can always keep checking and monitoring the patient for any changes in the vitals which is required, which is necessary. And patient should be very thoroughly reviewed throughout the program. And education is another important thing which should be taken care of, which should be discussed with the patient, communicated with the patient. What is their condition? How much is it affected? What has happened? And how much time will it take for them to recover? And how to manage the recovery, that has to be discussed and talked to with the patient, and has to be discussed with the patient. Now, the recommendations